Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. If you haven't already, feel free to put your location in the chat. It's great to see where everyone is joining us from today. This is going to be our first workshop of the fifth annual Climate Restoration Forum. And we just started the workshop format last year and thought it was a really wonderful way to get to put faces to all of the people who join these events every year, and also to get people more deeply and actively involved in the program. So thank you so much for being here. This is really maybe the best part of the forum, is just seeing you all and getting to speak together and be together. This is going to be an interactive session. So if you've been, doing the dishes while you listen in on the previous panels, get ready to put the dishes down, get yourself to a comfortable spot, and be ready to turn on your microphone, turn on your video, and really be here with everyone who's in the workshop. I'm going to give the floor to Aisha Swarn to start us off with the climate story in just a moment. But first, I just wanted to give a very brief context of why we're here today. As you all know, climate restoration is a critically important component of our global climate action that is often ignored. And one of the most important things that any of us can do to bring climate restoration into existence is to talk about it. But that's a pretty vague instruction, right? There are a lot of ways that one can talk about climate change, climate action, climate restoration. Um, and really, the most powerful way that we can talk about just about anything is to make it personal. So, this session is really intended for all of us to get some practice in bringing our own stories to the fore, so that when we talk to people, any people, about climate restoration, we know how to bring ourselves into the conversation and make it more relatable. So to give us an example of how that can look, I'm going to hand it over to Aisha Swaran to get us started with her own climate story.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this workshop. As Erica mentioned, my name's Aisha, and I'm a carbon restoration advocate. So far as we know, overconsumption, carbon emissions, corporate greed are contributing to the climate crisis. For far too long, hard data has been at the forefront documenting the effects climate change has on the environment. Due to this, we fail to really look at the individual stories that come along with the battle against climate change. Now, storytelling has the ability to allow a united global response to this climate crisis, because stories, unlike numbers or facts, can elicit an emotional response, leveraging the power of motivation, imagination, and personal values, all of which drive the most powerful and long-lasting forms of social change. Now, as climate change worsens, we should stop communicating it with facts and statistics and instead use stories like our own. You've probably heard my story in the opening session, but some things I did want to add was over the past few years, I have been experiencing and noticing the appearance of climate change. My childhood was filled with short rainy days and with cloudiness, 12-degree summers in the UK. Yet now in the United Kingdom, it's becoming more and more affected by rising temperatures. The most recent decade has been, on average, 0.8 degrees Celsius warmer than the 1961 to 1990 average, which is becoming very problematic. Now, I live in the West Midlands, specifically in the third largest city in the UK called Birmingham, and day in and day out, I see heavier rainfall, which is increasing the risk of flooding in the West Midlands. And in the summer, I see more and more long-lasting heat waves. And unfortunately, it's only getting worse. So now's the time to really share our individual stories and help make a change and difference. And with that, I'll pass it back to Erica. Thank you.
Thanks, Aisha. I'm really excited to have Jason Davis here with us today to lead us in this workshop. Jason is a bassist, composer, teacher, and the director of Climate Stories Project, an educational and artistic forum for sharing personal stories about the climate crisis. Jason leads workshops for students, organizations, and community members who learn to share their own stories of the changing climate. He also writes and performs original music, which incorporates the recorded voices of people from around the world speaking about their personal responses to the climate crisis. His goal is to help participants and audiences engage with climate change as an urgent human story. Jason teaches music and research methods at Worcester Polytech in Massachusetts. He holds a doctorate in performance studies from McGill University and a master's in interdisciplinary ecology from the University of Florida. Jason led a workshop for the F4CR staff and a few of our volunteers late last year, and it was really impactful and just gave us incredible insight into each other's backgrounds and reminded us why we're here doing this work in the first place. So thank you, Jason, for joining us today. We're really excited to be with you, and I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Erica. And I'm always impressed that you pronounce Worcester correctly, because it doesn't happen too often. So yeah, and thank you to Aisha for that story, and Hilda for also coordinating this workshop, and to the Foundation for Climate Restoration. And I only became aware of your work probably like 6 months ago, but I definitely see the vital importance of bringing that angle into our conversation about climate change. All right, so I think I'm just going to get right into it. I'll introduce myself a little bit more once I have a slide up. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so we're going to do climate storytelling workshop, just called Tell Your Climate Story today. If you'd like to check out our website, it's just www.climatestoriesproject.org. Lots of great information there about climate storytelling, climate stories from all around the world. Some of the music pieces I'm working on, which I'll show an example of a bit later in the workshop. Information about workshops if you're a teacher or an organizational leader, and a lot more. So, and if you want to get in touch with me, email is the best avenue to do that. So it's just jason@climatestoriesproject.org. Here's the plan for today. We'll talk about what a climate story is and why it's so important to share them. We'll listen to a few examples of a climate story. I'll talk about my work with climate storytelling and music. Then it's you guys' turn. So I'll introduce a framework for climate storytelling. You'll have a chance to sketch out your own climate stories, share with a partner. And if you want to grab some paper whenever is convenient, or just write in your device, that's fine as well. We'll have some time to share with the partner, and then with the whole group if you want. And then I'll leave you with some final thoughts. So what is Climate Stories Project? So here's what we do. We collect and share personal stories about climate change from all over the world. So there's stories from the United States, Canada, Europe, Latin America, Asia, etc. We lead climate storytelling workshops for schools, museums, libraries, environmental organizations, and governments. So really trying to spread climate storytelling into all facets of society and reach all types of people all over the world. We have a Climate Stories Ambassadors Initiative, which is an open format for people from all over the world who want to learn about climate story interviewing. So we do about 3 or 4 of these per year. We're right in the middle of one right now, but we'll probably have another one coming up in the fall. So stay tuned for that. And we also promote creative works which feature climate stories, which I'll show you an example of in just a bit. So a little bit more about me. So I have kind of a bit of a strange background. So I'm a musician, a double bass player, and also an environmentalist, a educator as well. So the way Climate Stories Project got started, it actually started as a music project, and I was looking for ways to communicate climate change through music, and I hit upon storytelling as the way to do that. So I decided to start recording people talking about their personal experience of climate change, and then setting their voices to music. And then from there, it grew into a website and the workshop format and all sorts of other things. So for me, I love being out of doors. You know, I'm actually in London right now. I'm from Massachusetts, but I'm here working with some students in London for a few months. And we were just talking before we started the session today that it's a great city, but I'm a little bit overwhelmed with the urbanness of it all. So I just love being outdoors. Just love pictures from Maine and last summer. And so I just love being in nature, hiking, bird watching, all kinds of outdoor activities. So I'd like to start with a little icebreaker question. So I imagine for this crew, probably everyone's going to say yes, but the question is, have you talked about climate change during the past week? So in this case, maybe outside of your professional setting, so with friends or family. And if so, who did you talk to and what did you talk about? So you're welcome just to unmute yourself and share. If you want to raise your hand, we can do that as well, or just put something in the chat if you would like. Oh, looks like some hand raised. Dr. Shiba.
Yeah, hi, I'm a doctor. I'm a medical doctor. I keep speaking about climate change maybe for the past 4 or 5 years. And last week I spoke to my students about planetary health, climate change, and the effects of climate change on the human health and one health. So mainly I was speaking about the effect of extreme heat and floods and other things, and what it causes to the mental health of the population, as well as what is the effect of climate change on the communicable diseases and non-communicable diseases like cardiovascular disease, asthma, and other diseases also. So I am very passionate about this effect of climate change and health, maybe for the past 4 or 5 years, since I knew what was happening with this climate change and the health. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, for sure. Health is a big linkage with climate change, and more and more people are becoming aware of that. So thank you. Maybe a few more. Terry, you want to share?
Yes, I was really excited about two things. One was the rights of salmon lawsuit went in favor of the salmon. That was pretty exciting. But the seabirds being reduced 70% since the 1950s, but having lots of projects that are bringing them back. And it turns out the upside is that it's also affecting the amount of carbon that seabirds are sequestering, which apparently they do through their defecation. Is pretty exciting to me.
Great.
So I guess I'm an animal-focused person.
I love it. Me too. I'm a birder myself. I'm definitely not as hardcore as other birders I know, because it's a little intimidating, but it's a great time of the year for that. Maybe one more. How about Andy? You want to share? And you got a Red Sox cap on, man. Are you in Boston?
I grew up in Massachusetts also.
Okay.
Yeah.
Keep it real. All right.
Thank you for being here and for sharing your story. And I guess the thing that I'm present to right now after this morning's panel is, like Erica shared, there's really no need, once you understand the work of the Climate Restoration Foundation and all of the partnerships, to sit inside of doom and gloom. And I just had this interaction on LinkedIn where I wrote something about human ingenuity and believing in that. And someone wrote a comment and said, yeah, it was like a comment that said, yeah, I don't really know if humans are, we're kind of doomed, basically. And I sensed this skepticism. And I just got on there and responded, because after listening to the sessions this morning, I'm realizing, like, the common narrative throughout the world, as Erica spoke to, is this is not good and we're not going in the right direction. So I'm reminded, just in, what is this, like 2 hours into the forum, of how important it is to tell our climate story, how important it is to speak to what is happening around the world and the possibility of climate restoration, because most people are not, I would say, even with the advancements, and we've had a ton in the recent years, are still not aware of the possibility and the promise in climate restoration. So I'm so grateful to be here and to be in this session about telling our climate story, because this is how we know human beings learn from one another through the millennia, is telling stories. And it's such a powerful place to be. And I'm grateful for all of you here.
Thank you so much, Andy. Yeah, I mean, certainly, like, the way we think and talk about climate change is really key to how we're responding to it. So there's all kinds of narratives, which could range from doom and gloom to sort of skepticism or dismissal to everything is going to be fine, let's just not worry about it, you know. So from my perspective, certainly digging into our way we think and talk about climate change is really crucial to making a difference. So thanks all. I'm going to forge ahead. So what's a climate story? And there's lots of ways to think about this, but a fairly simple way is just it's the intersection between your life and climate change. And that can include all kinds of facets, things like your culture, your personal identity, your emotional response, the changes you're observing in the environment, your connection to your home place. So from this web of ideas and connections and facets, we can draw out our climate story. There's a lot of directions this could take. So it's an open framework for climate storytelling. And why is it so important? Why should we tell our climate stories and share our climate stories? And I think Andy alluded to this a little bit, is that human beings are just wired for storytelling. So we respond to data, at least some of us. You know, I'm kind of a science geek in a certain way, and I like data, but not everyone does. But we all respond to stories. We're wired from evolution for millions of years to listen to other people, to hear about their personal experiences, to empathize with experience. And that storytelling can reach people in a way that data and politics really can't. We've also seen some really effective use of storytelling in other social movements. For example, the Black Lives Matter movement. So in that case, it's really not, people aren't just saying racism as a general thing is bad, but really here's my personal experience with racism or discrimination. And that storytelling has a lot of power. So now we can see the same impact of that happening with climate change. And we also have the opportunity to lift up marginalized voices. So I think we all know the deep injustice that's embedded with climate change, as the vast majority of greenhouse gas emissions historically have come and still are coming from developed countries, from richer communities, wealthier individuals. But the vast brunt of the impacts, at least so far, has been in disadvantaged communities and countries. So it's very important to raise the voices of people in those disadvantaged situations who are living through climate change. So storytelling has a lot of benefits, and your story is important. A few tips about climate storytelling, which I'll remind you of as we go. So one of them is that a climate story is based on a first-person perspective. So you're using a lot of I statements. This could be tricky. It can be kind of unusual. You know, I'm not always talking about climate change as my own personal experience, but for the sake of this workshop, you want to think about climate change in this perspective. So you want to use phrases like, I remember this, I've observed this, I feel this. As we'll talk about, emotions are very important in climate storytelling. I'm thinking about this, I'm worried about this. So try to think about flipping the subject of your sentences from climate change is this to I, etc. this. Whoops. Another really important tip about climate storytelling is that it uses specific details and sensory descriptions. So I've talked to a lot of people who've reported about wildfires happening in California, which I'm sure some of you have lived through. And people will talk about like the smell of the smoke that's affecting them, or the way that the sun looked when there was so much smoke in the air and the sky looked orange, for example. Those are really effective because, as we know from good writers, we do this all the time, right? You're using show, don't tell, rather than just describing something in a general way. It's very, very specific and sensory oriented. What's it smell like? What does it look like? What does it sound like? And as a musician, I really relate to sound. So for me, the most memorable example of this sensory detail experience was when I was working in an Inuit community up in Alaska. It's called Shishmaref. So it's a very small village. It's really ground zero for climate change. So Shishmaref is located on a little barrier island right on the Bering Sea. And because of sea ice melt from higher water temperatures, they don't have as much protection from big ocean storms. So therefore, you have a lot of erosion happening on the beaches, and that's damaged critical infrastructure like sewers and water lines. And it's gotten to the point where people in the village of Shishmaref actually voted to relocate from this barrier island onto mainland Alaska. So you can imagine what a big deal that is, even for a small village. And this is happening all up and down the coast of Alaska. So it's a growing problem. So I wanted to work there, and I contacted a teacher there, and he said, sure, come up and you can work with my students who are learning about climate change. And I wanted to teach about climate storytelling. So I worked with a group of 3 students. There's supposed to be 5, but 2 of them were off at a basketball tournament. And we talked about climate storytelling. We talked about what people were observing in the village of Shishmaref. And they went off and did interviews with their aunts, their uncles, their grandparents about local impacts of climate change. And I went off and did some of my own interviews too. And the last person I spoke with was an elder named John Sinek, who just had amazing details about wind direction changes, the way that fish populations were changing. And the most memorable detail of his story was about sound. And he actually said that when he was a child, he remembered that when people walked through the snow, it made a very sharp, crunchy sound because the snow was so cold and so dry. But as the climate has warmed, the snow consistency has changed. So now it doesn't sound the same. And that just blew me away, that using such a specific sensory detail to describe climate change. So I asked him if I could use some of his voice in a music piece, and he said yes. I'll play that in just a minute. But first, I want to play a bit of his interview from John Sinek. Just got to make sure I'm sharing my sound. And I think we should be good. If this doesn't work for some reason, please let me know.
So a little bit about our village here. Back when I was young, we have always had north wind all the time, and we would have blizzards and cold north winds for a good month. But after that, we would have real nice weathers for at least a month or over a month after that, where people can go out and hunt and get ice for drinking water. And it would be like that for a long time. And then when the snow gets so cold and dry that you can hear people walking outside. You could hear their footsteps outside because you can hear the crunch real easy on the snow. Nowadays, it doesn't get that hard anymore where you can hear people walking past. The snow doesn't get that hard dry anymore like it used to.
So like I said, that really impacted me, and I was just so impressed with the way he shared about climate change. I didn't prompt him to say this, of course. It just was natural for him to speak about climate change on this very personal, direct level because they're experiencing it so directly.
So
I'd like to share part of a music piece that I wrote and performed called Footsteps in Snow, where I used some of Mr. Sinek's words in the piece, and it's for solo double bass. I also tried to use some elements of traditional Inuit music. One of the techniques that they have is called throat singing, and that's when usually two women stand face to face and do this very guttural back and forth singing. And I will not do that because I'll deeply embarrass myself. But if you're interested, please have a look on YouTube and just check out Inuit throat singing. So I tried to replicate some of those sounds using the bow on the bass. So I'll just play a little bit of the piece and then we can go from there.
When I was young, when I was young, we have always had north wind. We have always had north wind all the time. And we would have blizzards. And we would have blizzards. And cold north winds for a good month. Cold north winds for a good month. And it would be like that for a long time. And it would be like that for a long time. But after that, the snow gets so cold. The snow gets so cold. That you can hear people walking outside. You could hear their footsteps outside. Nowadays, it doesn't get that hard anymore where you can hear people walking past. The snow doesn't get that hard dry anymore like it used to.
So I'd like to share that piece just to give you a sense for my artistic endeavors with climate storytelling, and just to encourage you, if you're a artist, musician, playwright, poet, there's all kinds of creative ways to use climate storytelling and touch that people in that way. I just took part in an event called Creative Climate Awards in New York City, and there were people who were visual artists and sculptors. It was really amazing to see the way people were engaging with climate change through the arts. All right, so another point is you don't have to be an Inuit elder to talk about climate change. So everyone has a climate story. It doesn't matter where you're from, your racial background, your gender, your age. I've worked with middle school students, and sometimes you might think, well, if you're a young person, you don't have much perspective about climate change. But even having an emotion about climate change or being concerned or worried, you can build a climate story around that. So once again, if you want to check out the Climate Stories Project website, you can listen to climate stories from all over the world and from all different types of people. All right, so now we're going to get into the climate storytelling and crafting part of the workshop. So I'm going to go through 3 prompts, and I'm going to talk about the prompts first. Then we'll have about 10 minutes to reflect on the prompts, do some brainstorming. Some people love to draw. I've seen some amazing pictures come out of this workshop. Just take notes or actually write your climate story. If you want to start writing out word for word, that's great too. We'll have a chance to share your climate story with a partner, and then we'll come back as a group and debrief. And if you want to share your story with the group, that's great as well. So the first prompt is, what do you care about in your home place or community, and how is that threatened by the changing climate? And what's really important is that we don't care about climate change just because it's climate change, but rather because it's impacting people we care about, places we care about, activities that we care about. And there's a influential article by Professor Susie Wang, and she uses the term objects of care. So that's different for everyone. It could be a favorite place to go fishing. It could be your children or your local farmer's market. It could even be something like an urban basketball court. Say your kids love to play basketball in the summer, but now it's getting too hot. So you care about that, and that could be an object of care for you. For me, I really relate to seasonal change, especially in Massachusetts. So I grew up in that state, and I really love the way the seasons go throughout the year, and especially the changes. So from, say, winter into spring or summer into fall, it just has a certain energy to it that's really comforting and exciting. But now as the climate is changing, those seasonal shifts are not quite as predictable. And sometimes it could be like extremely cold winter, and then all of a sudden the spring is very, very hot, and you lose that transitional period. And that, to me, that's sad. I really relate to that as a loss and as an object of care. So grounding your story in place and grounding it into something you care about is the entryway into your climate story. So the second prompt is, what are your emotional responses to climate change? And why do you have these responses? And it's also really important to tap into emotions. You might think we only need our rational brains to think our way out of the climate crisis, but we really know that's not true. And a lot of research has shown that in order to make good decisions, we actually need to tap into our emotional responses. And with climate change, it's most likely a range of responses that you're having to the crisis. Things like anxiety, grief, and sadness we know are quite common and, of course, expected with climate change. We've all heard about climate anxiety or eco-grief, and that's becoming more and more recognized as a legitimate mental health issue. People are going to the therapist and talking about how anxious they are about climate change. Anger, also very legitimate, and especially recently, when I hear about, say, ExxonMobil, they knew about climate change back in like the 1960s, and their own researchers said this is serious, this is happening, this is real, but they chose to push that aside and to finance groups that were denying the reality of climate change for decades. When I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, really the same conversation was taking place about this is real, this is serious, we have to do something about it. But we've done very little, as a society and certainly as governments and corporations. So that makes me very angry. And I certainly think that's a legitimate response to climate change. It is confusing. We don't really know what's going to happen. There's the good news is the future is still open. We're not totally set on one path, and a lot of exciting possibilities out there. So it's hard to know how things are going to shape up, and that can be confusing. Feeling things like hope or excitement for making positive change, and maybe we are going to have a much more positive future with a healthier environment and better connection to our communities. And of course, we need love. We need love for each other, for the environment, for the planet. And so that mix of emotions is very, very natural, and it's really part of experiencing climate change on an emotional level. And the last prompt is, why are you motivated to confront climate change? What do you envision as a more positive future, and how can you contribute to a more positive way forward? So this is taking your climate story, your personal experience of climate change, and pushing that towards action and towards engaging other people. So people also really respond to motivation. So probably you've had a conversation with someone who's a climate change denier or very skeptical, and it just didn't go anywhere. It just turned into a fight, or you left there kind of feeling hopeless about having people change their minds. But I know for me, if I talk about my motivation, that this is why I care about climate change, people respond to that, and they can't really take that away from you. They can't say, oh no, that's not true, because it's your motivation, and that's very powerful. What do you envision as a more positive future? So we need a vision for a more positive future to make change. It can't just be, this is all doom and gloom and we're not going to get through this. what kind of a future, what kind of a world, what kind of a community do we want to live in given the climate crisis? And how can you contribute to a positive way forward? Certainly, there's no one right answer to this. Some people are very involved with politics, either on the local level, say national level, and that's great. It's definitely needed. Even things like protests, right? Like tying yourself to oil pipelines. I definitely don't do that myself, but I do think we need direct action in order to confront the crisis that we're in. A very simple action could be taking your climate story and sharing that with an elected official, because as we mentioned before, people respond to storytelling. So instead of just saying, I care about climate change, it's really bad, but being more specific about your personal experience, your emotions, and your motivation for change. You might be excited about getting involved with your community, about using say resilience activities, planting gardens, solar energy. And I know you are all very involved with climate restoration. So you have that viewpoint as your way forward with making positive change. So certainly talking about climate restoration and the importance of that and tying that to your personal climate story is one great way to use that to motivate people for positive change. Okay, so before we start writing or brainstorming, I just wanted to play an example of a climate story. This is from an activist and social leader named Matt Scott. He's in Washington, D.C., and he works for the organization Project Drawdown, which you may have heard about. I think he told a really good story, and he kind of followed the prompt structure nicely, which you don't have to do, but I think he did a nice job of talking about his connection to his home place, some of his emotions around climate change, and then how he's advocating for a more positive future. So let's just have a listen to his story.
Hi, my name is Matt Scott. I'm 28. I live in Washington, D.C., and right now I'm actually just outside the city at Great Falls Park in Virginia. And when people think of Washington, D.C., they often think of the monuments and politics and the tourist destinations, but they won't necessarily think of all of the green areas we have. And in DC, while I live right off of Rock Creek Park, which spans the city and really takes up so much of the city, I actually decided to come out today to enjoy one of our other beautiful green areas. I think I first started to experience the impacts of climate change in my experience of DC in 2010 when I moved to DC, because that summer, I remember getting all the text notifications about the air alerts, the air quality, about the heat. And that's when I first truly experienced and was aware of the impacts, but I didn't really tie back those things to climate change and a bigger problem that we could really do something about. Since my first summer in DC, we've had 5 of DC's 6 hottest summers ever on record, and I think that's sad. And I want for people in general, but my nephew Micah, who's 2 years old, to grow up in a world where he could enjoy the natural environments like this and appreciate the nature and plant life and animals that make this world so beautiful and that we often overlook. I feel hopeful as a social impact project manager and storyteller, as the climate solutions storyteller at the organization Project Drawdown, and as someone who interviews hundreds of change makers, including through Let's Care, that there are people who are out here making an impact. That energy is out there. It's something we could tap into, and it's something that I plan on tapping into and helping others tap into to make an impact, because there's so many people who want to enjoy planet Earth, that want to have the benefit of this world as something that generations could still inhabit and build and benefit from and share with their future generations. And that's not going to happen without all of us. It's an all hands on deck effort, and I'm really proud to be part of it. But for now, I'm going to enjoy this beautiful day. So thank you for watching, and thank you for listening to my climate story.
I think after all these years of Zoom, I'd remember to unmute myself, but there you go. So I think Matt Scott does a great job at talking about his climate story in a really relatable way with his connection to his home place, his concern for his nephew, and his many activities he's involved with to promote positive change.
Hi, my name is Matt.
Okay, so now it's your turn to start thinking about your own climate story. So you have several options here. You can write this on paper. If you want to use your tablet or device, that's fine too. If you'd like to actually write out word for word a climate story, that's great. If you want to just take notes or draw, that's awesome too. Best to start with my name is this, I'm from this place, and focus on what's most meaningful to you. So I'm going to put the prompts back up on the screen, but you're not required to use those prompts. So if there's an element of your story that you really want to dig into or start with, that's great too. And your story is not a script, it's a way of processing information. So especially at this stage, you're not looking to develop like a polished story. Just get your ideas out, and that's a start of the process. Later, if you want to develop it more and share it on the website, that's certainly an option. But don't feel at this point like you have to do a whole lot of editing or polishing up. Okay. So here's the prompts. We'll take about 10 minutes to write. I'm going to turn off my camera and I'll just time it for 10 minutes. And I'll do a announcement when there's about 2 minutes left in the time we have. I just wanted people to remember to use the I statements, the first person perspective, and to look for those specific sensory details. So what does climate change look like? What does it sound like? What does it smell like in your experience? All right, so I'm going to start the timer, and like I said, I'll let you know when there's about 2 minutes remaining for your writing time. So I've got about 2 more minutes left to write. All right, everyone. So I realize that's not very much time at all, but again, it's just a chance to get started with your story and do some brainstorming. So don't feel like you didn't do enough or it's not finished. It's totally fine. Okay, so now we're gonna have time to share with a partner in breakout groups. So we have about 10 minutes for this. So once you're in your group, it's up to you if you want to like read your story directly to the other person. If you just have some notes or bullet points and want to share ideas that you have, that's great too. So take about 4 minutes each. So sharing for 4 minutes and listening for 4 minutes. You also have a few minutes just to introduce yourself, get to know each other a bit, and just debrief. So I guess if anyone does not want to be in a breakout group, you can message me. You might have to fiddle with things a little bit, but I'm going to set this up if I can. Breakout rooms. Okay. Okay, so you might have a room of 3 if that works out. Whoops. Okay, so here we go, and I will send a message when you should switch to another part, your other sharing or listening if you haven't done that yet. Okay, I'm going to close the rooms for people, so let's just start coming back pretty soon. Yeah, I know for me, it's always really interesting to hear people's stories and to, my story sometimes keeps changing. I always think back to the seasons in Massachusetts, but now that I've traveled a lot and I've heard all kinds of different stories from people, and that also has an impact on how I think about climate change and how I experience it. And I think it does get like more and more personal as I move through this sharing and this project, and it really doesn't feel as abstract as it used to. So. All right, so people are coming back in. All right, welcome back, everyone. I apologize for the minor technical issues with the breakout rooms. Sometimes it happens, like connections get weird and people have to get shifted around. But we did it. Hopefully it was enjoyable and enlightening to speak with 1 or 2 other people in your room. Okay, so now we have some time. If anyone wants to share what you talked about or ideas that came up to you as you were starting this process of creating your climate story or talking to other people about it. So I'll just open up the floor, if you want to just unmute yourself or raise your hand. That would be great. Looks like Melanie, do you want to share?
I do, thank you. One of the things I recognize in the process of this workshop, I share about climate all the time, but the experience of it is something I never share, and I wasn't aware. It's just, it's opened up so much emotion in me because I don't let myself go there. And I don't share that part of it. And so there's just this release and some, I'm surprised to discover that. And I'm really excited to kind of finish up my story and to be able to come from there, because even just the impact on me personally, I see that is what relates to people, and I'm so appreciative. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Melanie. Yeah, I was really touched by your words too, and that's, in a sense, that's good for me to hear, and that it is giving you a chance to express some of the feelings or sensations that you might have about climate change, but you maybe don't have the chance to talk about in general. So that's one of the goals of this workshop format, is to give people the safe space to talk about those things. So thank you. Philip, would you like to share?
Sure, absolutely. So, gosh, there's so many things I could share. Where should I go? Well, I first heard Peter Kowski and Dr. Erica Dodd speak about 3 years ago at a conference for global transformation. And after that, I was so wowed that I became the chair of the North Bay chapter. I started it. And I would say every day I'm either reading something about climate restoration or something related to climate restoration, low body carbon concrete. I mean, there's a lot to learn, but I've been pretty much daily either learning or calling someone. And one of the best things that Peter said you could do is what I am, be a big mouth. So I just, I'm a big mouth, and I talk to everybody and tell them about climate restoration, about the North Bay chapter, and low and body whatever I'm learning about, and carbon markets. And I guess the most recent thing that has me really wanting to do this is I just became a new grandpa, and he's 4 weeks old, and I definitely want him to have a future to live into where he can live and thrive. So that's all I'll share for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip, and congratulations. I mean, I think that the general sense I got from your share is just talking about climate change is really important. And we often just don't have the space for that, given our culture and emphasis on consumerism and acquiring things. Talking about what is really meaningful issues is sometimes just challenging outside of forums like this. So thank you. Who's next? Shiva, would you like to share?
Yeah. Actually, I'm basically from Kerala. It is a South Indian state in India. And I have grown up in a farmland with a lot of green spaces and blue spaces. We had our own pond. We had our own well. We were never dependent on a corporate water supply or anything. And we had a lot of green spaces with all the vegetables and fruits. It was not alone our house. It was all the neighboring houses also were like that. But now what I cry for, I really miss is all of that has changed. We have grown up in that kind of space, but now I don't see any more people who are rearing the cows, who are rearing the gods, or who are doing the poultry, and the sympathy, empathy towards our animals, that's lost. And all the green spaces are lost. Most of the spaces, we all carry a plastic bag, go to supermarket and get the veggies, and we think that's the fashion. And I feel so bad, like we have only one planet, that's our planet Earth. We don't have an option of planet B. And what we are leaving for our next generation, for our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. And I think it has influenced, it has changed the climate in a lot of ways, because a lot of urbanization and carbon dioxide, methane from the mass poultry and dairy farming. And we are definitely indirectly contributing to the climate change. And my emotions towards the climate change, if you ask me, are grief, sadness, anger, frustration, depression, anxiety. But the last one, but not the least one, is hope. Because there are a lot of public and government agencies and NGOs who are coming forward, and we are doing so much in the way of nature-based solutions for restoration of the climate change. So I feel hopeful that if all of us work together with the same intention and passion, maybe we will leave behind and we will a better planet, and we will at least try to give back something for the Mother Earth, who was providing everything for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Shiva. Yeah, very well said. And yeah, we don't have planet B. I mean, that's just fundamental truth, and I think the more we keep that perspective, the more we realize how crucial it is that we find our way through this and work together. Thank you.
Yeah, we take all the natural resources, use it, and what we are giving in return to Mother Earth, we are only like bruising her and hurting her. So it's time for like giving back.
Yeah.
Thank you.
She's a very forgiving mother up to a certain point, right? Thank you, Shiva. Sally, would you like to share?
Yes, a lot of what I want to share is being said, and I love your questions, Jason, because I really didn't know what my motivation was or what were my emotional responses, and I got to see that I am so attached to nature and to nature and nurturement. And the nurturement of the land has been it's been in my family. I mean, gardening has just been so much of how I grew up. And imagining the land either flooded or drought ridden, and in both cases, full of non-nutritive particles, and the possibility of shifting toward a land that is crawling with all of these microbes that are health-inducing and creating our food supply in a healthy way is drawing me forward. And also, when you said what motivated me, it's to the energy of working on this. And this came out in my breakout room too, that action in this group and similar groups helps me get to the energy that is the possibility for humanity. And we need that. And it empowers me. It keeps me from depression.
Mm-hmm.
So great questions, and just thanks a lot.
Thank you, Sally. Great to hear from you. And yeah, I think you said it, you hit it right in hit the nail on the head, is the antidote to depression is action and working together. So it's very easy to get stuck on our heads and feel hopeless. I mean, I've been there many times, trust me. But just hearing from you all and working together on this is motivating and inspiring. So thank you. We have a bit more time. How about Noreen? You like to share?
Thank you. This exercise really revealed the extent to which I am stuck in the, I guess, mitigation phase, because it really brought up my frustrations, my, it looks hopeless. And taking your coaching to like really bring it to something, one of the senses. I used peanut butter as my launch into talking because I love peanut butter. I love the smell of it, the crunchy kind especially. And for my whole life, I have not found out how to use the jar it comes with in. I'm really frustrated by not knowing how to deal with plastics. I'm really in the midst of the swirl of even my own recycling curbside company is, I don't trust what they're doing. And I still don't hear anybody really tackling reusing plastic, recycling plastic bags, and more products come in plastic bags. So I don't mean to be all negative here in this wrap up, but the opportunity in that short session to express that frustration was really an important thing as I return to my commitment to this beautiful planet. I want to have it available. I want to go see more beauty. I want to enjoy the beauty. I want to love my life and share it with you all. Okay, that's the best I can do in a short time. But thank you very much. It was really a useful exercise.
Great, thanks, Noreen. Yeah, you know, it's those peanut butter jars are really hard to clean out. That's been my experience.
Yep, they tell you you have to clean it, and even my most recent communication was that you dry it before you put it in your recycle bin.
It's a lot of work. There should be a better way, right? But
using the water resources and the hot water to clean up something that you're gonna.
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of talk about getting
enough.
Yeah, you know, it's a systemic thing too. Like, why is there so much plastic? That's a huge issue that we could also talk about for a long time. But I think we're doing the best we can, you know, given the system that we have. So, thank you.
Thank you.
But Peter, would you like to share for a bit?
Yes. One last thing here. That is, you've all heard of the term legacy carbon dioxide. How many of you have been online to find out what the carbon dioxide concentration in Earth's atmosphere was in the year of your birth? I did that for mine. I was born in 1944. And in 1944, the concentration was 310 parts per million. And of course, I knew nothing about that. Very few of us had even thought about it at all. And as a child, as a young person, I didn't get hold of that at all. As we heard a little bit earlier today, it didn't get up to 350 until 1988. And so the 310 to 420, which is what it is now, is my legacy. It's not a legacy I like. And it's your legacy too. And I am determined to do something about that, to let people know that this is all our legacy, that we are leaving to our children and grandchildren unless we do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, it can be hard to confront that. I mean, I think especially for those of us living in wealthier countries, we're all part of this in some way, shape, or form. I mean, certainly we can look to large corporations as being deceptive and very, very responsible, but we are all a part of this. So it can be just hard to look at that, and I've heard some really powerful climate stories of people wrestling with that, sense of guilt or implication, and what does that mean for them going forward. So thank you. All right, maybe time for one more. Jim, would you like to share briefly?
Yes. So I just want to thank you for this opportunity to look at our stories. There's a couple of things I want to say to just for myself personally. When you say emotionally, it really re-exposes for me how much I care. And yeah, I even shared my story so quickly and excitedly that I didn't really expose how much I really did care. I really do care about it. And everything that's said here is relevant to having a world that prospers, and humanity prospers, and all life flourish. And so I just, all of us, whatever it is, this is the biggest opportunity we've ever had as humanity to thrive. So it just brings that back into focus. So thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, I mean, I really felt the emotional response in your words there, and that's so important. I mean, if everyone knows Joanna Macy's work, the work that reconnects, she's a real pioneer in learning how to sit with some of these very difficult feelings. And I think culturally it goes against our cultural nature of like, here's this problem, let's fix it and move on. And she says, no, we can't do that. We need to really feel what that feels like to living in this world, this kind of precarious moment in time, and share that with other people. So I definitely encourage you to investigate Joanna Macy's work if you haven't done that. Unfortunately, we do need to wrap up, so I'm just going to share a few more slides. But thank you so much for sharing what you have so far. And just one more reminder that you don't have to be done yet, right? There's more to work on. I'm just going to share a few more slides before we wrap up. Oops, somehow that's not what I wanted. Are you guys seeing my screen or no?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Let's try that again. Take two. Let's try this again. Man, my Zoom chops have really atrophied. It's clearly. Good? Yes?
Yeah.
All right. Success. Okay, so we kind of went through that. Just wanted to leave you guys. Well, thank you again for participating and sharing, but just a few ways you can stay involved with Climate Stories Project. You can keep working on your story, and if you want to record it, you have a chance to actually share it on the Climate Stories Project website. And recording it does not have to be anything sophisticated or technologically daunting. Like, all you really have to do, if you want to keep it simple, is just grab your phone and do an audio recording of yourself sharing your story. And then if you go to the climatestoriesproject.org website, actually I'll briefly show this to you as well. So this is the website. and climatestoriesproject.org. If you want to share your story, here's the easiest way to do it. So you just go to the Share Your Story tab here at the top, share your climate story. And they give you some tips to continue planning out your story. Here's the prompt structure right here that we went through. You can listen to some stories on the website, of course. It gives you some tips for recording, like finding a quiet space. You want to keep your story to about 1 to 3 minutes in length. It gives you some audio recording tips, and then you can share it right here. So first you have to give permission to share your story on the website. So you put your name, your email address, phone number is optional. We do need to know where you live, so your hometown or city in the country you're from and today's date. And then you need to grant permission. So if you're okay with sharing your story, you can just grant permission right here. If anyone is sharing who's under 18, you do need to get parental or guardian permission to do that. Whoops. And then you can just upload the story as an MP3 file if it's an audio file. If you want to share a video, that's possible as well. Just contact me via email or through the contact form on the website, and we can arrange that. And then upload a photo of yourself. Then I'll get back to you and just check in, and then we can share a story. So hopefully that's fairly straightforward. So we do have a newsletter, which you can sign up for right on the website. That goes out, it's about once a month, where I'll share featured stories, I'll share upcoming events, sometimes workshops that are open. So please do sign up for that. As I mentioned at the beginning, towards the beginning of the workshop, we have what's called the Climate Stories Ambassadors Initiative. So that's an open initiative that anyone can take part in from all over the world. It's all online. And we'll do some similar things to what we did today about telling your own climate story, but also going beyond that and learning to interview other people about their climate story. So taking things one step further. It's a 3-month series of workshops, and it happens over about 3 months. So you have time between the workshops to go out and talk to people. We have a brand new kind of nascent initiative for teachers out there, which is a Climate Stories Project Partner Schools Network. The idea here is if you're a teacher and you want your students to, say, speak with students from a school from somewhere else in the world or somewhere else in the country, you can set up an exchange either on Zoom or just like a lesson plan or something like that. So as of right now, all we have is a spreadsheet with names of interested people and contact information of people who want to share their contacts. So at this point, I imagine it's going to be for the fall for most people. But there's a little sign up option for that in the contact form as well, or you can also share that with other teachers, And if you want to lead a climate story workshop for your organization, I can help you with that. Or we do offer facilitated workshops just like this one. So if you'd like to have this workshop done at your school or your organization, I'd love to hear from you. And just please reach out about that. So that is pretty much all I have for today. I'd just like to end with this quote from environmentalist and educator David Orr, who says, "Hope is a verb with its sleeves rolled up." So to me, this really encapsulates what we're doing here. We have hope, we want a better future, but we also have work to do, and we also have things to talk about. So I'll leave you with that. I want to thank Erica and Hilda for their organization of this, and Foundation for Climate Restoration for all their great work. And of course, I want to thank all the participants here, and I'm really, really touched by what you've shared today. And I do want to encourage you that your stories are very important. So keep working on them, reach out with questions, and hopefully you want to share and continue the journey.